Hello, this is just a brief video to go over the 3 laws of communication as they relate to technical writing that you do for mechanical engineering, and also to review what goes into a problem statement, as you will be writing a problem statement for the zombie competition very soon. So remember that before we even get to laws number 1, 2, and 3, we have this underlying zeroth law that says you must understand your purpose before you even begin. And we'll talk when we review problem statements about what the purpose of that problem statement is. The first law, hopefully you've got these memorized by now, is to adapt to your audience. So in other words, before you even start, you need to think about who it is that you are trying to communicate with, anticipate their questions, and use an appropriate tone, appropriate words, appeal to their expectations of what needs to be communicated. Okay. So we're looking at sample problem statements. The original is on one side, and if you recall this way back from last fall, it's a little bit messy. It starts out at the very beginning saying, "The women of this village currently raise chickens," and all of a sudden the audience is going, "Huh? What? What women? What village? What's going on?" So our problem statement here doesn't address audience. It doesn't give us enough context for what this problem statement is trying to accomplish. So when it's revised, over on the other side, we've got a definition of who it is that's employing us, what we're going to build right off the top, who it's for, and then starts to be much more specific about defining terms that are vague, like cold in the original becomes rarely dropping below 60 degrees in the revision. What else, as you're looking at those two statements, the original and the revision, have the writers done in their revision to address audience? Okay, law number 2, maximize the signal-to-noise ratio, and that just means to get rid of some of that noise, right? And when we're talking about written communication, we're talking about things that just trip up the reader. So incorrect grammar, spelling, punctuation, information out of order, verb constructions that are either vague or passive or don't make sense. Anything that's too vague, too wordy, or just not clear is going to make it more difficult for that audience to understand what you're talking about. So this one I'm just going to give you a second to look at and think about. We've got, again, the original, a little snippet from that problem statement, and then a revision. Take a look and come up with 2 ways that the writers reduced noise when they revised those sentences. Okay, law number 3, use effective redundancy. And that doesn't mean to be redundant, but to use effective redundancy. So in other words, utilize the genre conventions that might be available to you, whether it's headings that guide readers through what you're writing. Make sure that any paragraph that you ever write has a clear topic sentence that announces what that paragraph is going to cover. And then remember to provide examples to illustrate points. If you're talking about something in the abstract, it often will help your audience to then follow it up with some sort of concrete example or metaphor that explains that abstract concept. Now, problem statements are short, so you might not have as much opportunity within, say, a short paragraph to utilize effective redundancy, but you do want to keep some of these things in mind. So here again, a few sentences from the original problem statement and then a revision. How do you think these writers made better use of effective redundancy? Well, one of the things they did was announced at the beginning what the project was. So notice that in the original problem statement, they just start talking about what's going on in the village, but the revision starts with a direct statement of what the team is is tasked with designing. So in other words, the audience right away knows that this isn't just some story about chickens and eggs in Guatemala, but it's a problem statement about designing a new chicken coop. What else do you see there? Notice that the topic stays on the coop. So we've got sentences that reiterate the coop is to be located, blah, blah, blah. The goal of the coop is this. So it helps the reader to go through and understand those sentences by putting the old information, the chicken coop, at the beginning of the sentence and the new information towards the end. That's one way they use redundancy there. Okay, and then I gave you my own law, which is that writing is revising. So this is just a review from last semester. Notice that the writing process and the design process are not entirely different. You assess your purpose and audience, brainstorm, plan, outline, draft, evaluate, and revise in the writing process. So let's just take a minute to review what a problem statement is. This is from the Dim and Little design text. A problem statement is a pre-processing stage that frames the problem by clarifying it before conceptual design begins. Okay, that's a little vague and abstract, but here's what a problem statement includes. Objectives, which characterize what is being designed and how it will behave, metrics that determine success, and constraints that are, if you remember, of course, constraints are the limits within which the design must remain. So let's take a look at a first draft of a problem statement. I'll go ahead and let you read that for yourself there. Okay, let's have a brief discussion. I know it's just me talking to you, but hopefully this will cover some of your own ideas. Let's identify some of the problems with this, both in terms of the three laws, audience, noise, redundancy, and also just in terms of what a problem statement is supposed to do. One of the things I'm going to suggest to you is that, first of all, it doesn't start out identifying this paragraph as a problem statement. It doesn't even get to the point that something is going to be designed until the very end. So your audience is kind of misled, I would say, with that first sentence, because the first sentence leads us to believe that this is about instruments for this kind of surgery, but it doesn't let the audience know that this is a problem statement that's going to define a design task to solve this problem. And then, of course, when we get down to the end, there aren't any metrics established for what stabilize really means, and the constraints there that the system must not compromise the visualization of the vocal cord is very kind of abstract and not particularly specific. So let's take a look at one revision. Of course, when we're talking about writing, there aren't necessarily right answers, but we'll see if this has any improvements over the first draft. I apologize, it is a little longer. It starts out by defining what the surgery is. To my taste, I don't like the fact that it still doesn't tell you that it's a problem statement, so I would suggest an even further revision. But it does do a few things that the previous draft didn't do. For example, if we look down a little further, it does give us a little bit more understanding of the metrics that will determine whether this is a successful design or not. It tells us that the unintentional movements at the distal end of the instrument we're supposed to reduce them to an amplitude of no more than 1/10 of a millimeter. So at least we've got some idea of what will make this a successful design. We still have this kind of vague constraint that the solution must not compromise visualization of the vocal cords. So there's probably some room to work on this, but as you can tell, this one's a lot more specific. It does take into account what would be a sort of success benchmark for this design, and also appeals to the audience a little bit more. I think it could be improved. So with that, I will leave you to think about how you could even further apply those 3 laws and the purpose of a problem statement to revise that to be even more successful. And hopefully this will help you in your teams as you devise a problem statement for your spring design competition. If you have any questions, I do keep office hours on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons in the CLEAR offices, or you can email a question through the trouble ticket list at Moodle. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you soon. Take care.